Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manoj Agarwal, and today we'll be talking to a very good friend and mentor, Dov Baron. So Dov is the founder and CEO of Dov Baron International. He's a preeminent expert in helping leaders create life and work meaning. His models and strategies of the emotional source code and the anatomy of meaning are used by leaders in business and governments worldwide. Dove has been named a top 30 global leadership guru 5 times and an Inc. magazine top leadership speaker twice. He is the creator and host of two popular podcasts, Leadership and Loyalty, which has been named number one podcast for Fortune 500 executives by Apple Podcast, and Curiosity Bites, which has featured hundreds of hours of interviews with top leaders, scientists, theologians, military intelligence officers, and artists. Dove has written and has been interviewed by many media outlets, including CEO World, CNN, Elle Italia, Entrepreneur, and Fox. He's the author of several books, including bestsellers on Amazon. As a speaker, Dove has presented to the United Nations, the Department of State, the World Management Forum, the Servant Leadership Institute, the World Management Forum in Iran, and the United States Air Force. Dove's lifelong search for meaning began in poverty stricken northern England, surrounded by crime, violence, and addiction. Determined to escape suffering and abuse, he embarked on a transformative journey, learning from renowned thinkers and becoming a successful entrepreneur across 3 continents. Welcome, Dove.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure and honor. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So you've had such an amazing life, coming from where you were and where you are today. So I think we should get to know you better. So, can you tell us a little bit about your story? Growing up in UK and where you are today, and how did you get here?
Wow, we don't have that long, do we? um, excuse me. I was born, as you said, in Northern England, surrounded by crime and violence and addiction and abuse of all kinds of things. Grew up in a large family. I'm the eldest of a bunch of kids, and at a very early age, had this sense that this is not where I'm supposed to be. And that wasn't sort of like "ooh, I'm better than these people." It was just like I think many of us have the feeling like, was I adopted? Is this the wrong family? I think most of us have gone through some of that, but this was different. It was a sense of not belonging where I was, not just in the family, but where I was, that there was a bigger, higher calling. And at a very early age, I was having these conversations like this at 5, 6, 7 years old with my mother, who thought I was woohoo. So she shipped me off to the rabbis to see what was going on, and I began to study metaphysical understanding, religious philosophy at a very early age. By the time I was 11, I taught myself prana yoga
Oh
as
wow.
well, and then I decided that I would travel the world to study these things. So I studied Vedanta, which is Hindu philosophy, Buddhism, the Tao, Gnostic and Coptic Christianity, Kabbalah, as I said, which is Jewish philosophy, um, and many other faiths, but touching on them. The ones I talked about were the sort of diving in. And all the time, I was also very entrepreneurial. So I was fascinated by religion and the philosophy of religion, by psychology of what drove human beings, and by creativity in the form of business. So it was this weird mix up. So I began to travel around the world and studied, as I said, but I also owned businesses in the UK, in Canada, and in Australia. So on 3 separate continents, and then went from the metaphysical side to trying to understand this question that had driven my life, which is, why do people do what they do, even when what they do doesn't make sense? By the way,
Mhm.
even to them.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we've all
yeah.
had those moments. You look at that person, you're like, "You're smart. Why did you do that?" Right? We've all had those.
Mhm.
So I studied psychology to understand that. Became a Jungian therapist and got frustrated with people who wanted to complain and lie on a couch. That wasn't going to work for me. So I studied what was then called the psychology of excellence. Today, that's called leadership, and found a lot of soulless individuals, people who had achieved enormous amounts, like insane amounts, and realized from my point of view, they were running from their pain in the
Mm,
form of success. So
mm,
what I know for sure in 30, moving towards 40 years of this work, is that the people who went through the most amount of trauma are often the ones who are the most entrepreneurial, the most creative. Uh, and that's great and wonderful and has made a big difference in the world. But it's also been a mechanism, a coping mechanism to hide from their pain. So in 83, I stumbled into quantum physics and neuroscience and began studying those things and then put it all together in the emotional source code, which is the work that I do with these high level individuals. Now, that's a quick overview. Would you believe it? That's a quick
mm.
version.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll dive a little bit deeper into all of this, but yeah, what a fascinating story! What a fascinating journey. So, first of all, it's so surprising that a lot of people cannot grasp one topic in their lifetime, but it
Mhm,
seems like you have grasped, not only grasped, but like sort of, really refined, synthesized many topics,
mhm.
um, and they are very opposing things like metaphysical and religion and entrepreneurship and leadership. So how do you wrap your head around about around so many diverse topic and still be able to talk about it in a simple, intelligent ways that other human beings can understand?
You know what? Thank you for asking that. It's a really great question. Because, well, first of all, I'm a polymath, and polymaths, we love to learn lots of different things. But as the way my brain works in pattern recognition. So I'm looking for the patterns in things that overlay in the patterns of other things. So as a result, I'm able to see the connection between things that other people don't see connections between. So, for instance, when I'm working with a client, they're working in technology, okay, and their passion is for technology. And I say, "What's your purpose?" And they go, "Well, my purpose is to bring the greatest technology in the world." And I'm like, "No, that's not your purpose. That's what drives you at a
Mhm,
intellectual level, but that's not
mhm,
your purpose." And they go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Your purpose is something you've not connected yet
mhm,
because you've not seen how it overlays."
mhm,
So I'll give you a simple example. When I trained to be a Jungian therapist, I was 5 months into my training, and they brought independents in to see how we were doing with our training. And these
mhm,
independent sort of inspectors who ran us through dummy sessions, right? And I was going through this dummy session with this, this tester who stopped about 20 minutes in and said, "Stop, this is not funny to me."
mhm, mhm,
And I went, "Okay, what's not funny?" And he calls over the supervisor and said, "This is not a good funny. This is not a good idea. You've tried to do this before with us. You put an instructor in the seat for me to test the instructor, and I'm supposed to be testing the students, and this person's obviously not a student." And I'm like, "Huh?"
mhm,
And he said, "No, no, he is a student." And I'm saying, "Yeah, I am, honestly." And he's like, "This is nonsense. I know you're an instructor. You've had at least 5 years as an instructor." I
mhm,
said, "I've been in
mhm,
this 5 months."
mhm,
So what was it that made me appear to have 5 years experience when I only had 5 months? Well,
mhm,
the answer was that all the other studies I'd done were correlating in my brain to what I was learning. On top
mhm,
of that, I had been a hairdresser. I owned hair
mhm,
salons. And you
mhm.
stand at the back of the chair cutting people's hair and doing their hair, they tell you everything, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
learn to shut up and ask the right questions.
yeah.
So I'd been trained for 7 years of doing that, of having hair salons and being a top stylist to learn those skills. We don't learn to make these connections. So
Yeah, yeah.
my work in how I'm able to explain these things is to have people understand, here's the connection between this and that you never thought of. And they always
Mhm,
go, "Wow, why didn't I think of that?" It's
mhm.
obvious when you know it. It's just not obvious until you know it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
once you understand that, it's fascinating. I'll give you one more example. Is that okay?
Of course, of course.
Right. So one more example. You may or may not have heard of a neurochemical called oxytocin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's what happens when we fall in love. When a woman gives birth to a child, she is flooded with oxytocin in her brain, and the baby's brain is flooded with it. And if the dad's in the room, he's flooded with it, even though he's not on the boob, right? So
Mm-hmm.
he's still flooded with it as a part of
Yeah.
that, and it
Yeah.
bonds us, it connects us. Okay, so then we look at that and we go, okay. So one of the questions that I was asked years ago in an interview, I studied cult psychology as a sidebar of my neuroscience. And one of the questions I was asked is, how do people do the things they do in cults when they seem to be really good people? And I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's take an example of a Nazi soldier who's
Mm-hmm.
working at one of the horrible war camps. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
he's working at Buchenbau or wherever it may be that people are being exterminated. How does he work there and still go home and be a husband and a father? Like, does that make sense? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, it makes absolutely sense. And they said,
Mm-hmm.
how? I can't. They seem so polar
Mm-hmm.
because these are soldiers who murdered babies and would
Mm-hmm.
go home and play with their own children and be loving. And if you interviewed their wife, they would say, what is a loving dad?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oxytocin.
Mm-hmm.
Oxytocin is the hormone that allows us to bond, but it allows us to bond because human beings are tribal. It allows us to bond at a tribal level. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? It means I bond with my tribe, but that same hormone allows me to other people outside of my tribe. So
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
behave in a completely inhuman way to those who are outside of the tribe and still behave in an incredibly empathetic and compassionate and loving way inside of my tribe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people would never make that connection.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is why the CEO can be a complete asshole in a company,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And a complete pushover at home.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So it looks like these things are opposite, but they're actually heads and tails of the same coin. And this
Absolutely.
is how
Yeah.
we need to understand ourselves and understand those who work with us and those we're doing business with is there is always going to be a polarity and you need to look for where that is
Yeah.
because that will
Yeah.
give you your strength in understanding the person you're dealing with and how to do business with them.
Yeah. Well, absolutely great. Those are great examples. Now, let's talk about your ability to make these connections. Like,
Mhm.
so I think you have had a great advantage of reading so much at a young age and collecting experiences in different fields. Um, and I think a lot of people, in the industrial education system, we are trained in one specific field. We go deep into that, but we don't know anything about the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is, in my opinion, and this happened to me as well, I just used to think, look at the world as from one uh, lens only, like
Yes.
engineering point of view. And the idea is that as we start to read other topics, we see that the problems, the patterns are the same in different fields, and we can like uh, these are portable concepts that I can bring from one field to another, right? So you've had that advantage. Now let's unpack that. Like, how
Mhm.
much of that contributed to your success? And then the other part is, like, do you think we can teach this to other people?
Um, I'll do the second part first. I think it's
Mm,
absolutely teachable,
mm,
but there has to be a willingness to learn it, as with anything else. And by when I say a willingness to learn it, it's not, oh, yeah, I'd like to learn that. No, no. I'm
mm,
talking about a hunger. If you
mm,
don't have a hunger, you're not learning anything. I don't care what you tell me. I'm not really, I'm impatient with that. I'm sorry.
mm,
But it's
mm,
like, I know you said you want to learn it. I've said I want to learn Spanish. I still don't speak any Spanish.
mm,
Do I want to learn it? Yes.
mm,
Am I putting any effort in? No,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because I'm not. It's not a hunger.
yeah,
Drop
yeah,
me in the middle of some village in Mexico, it'll be a
yeah,
different story.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right now, it's not.
Mm, mm,
So that's the piece. Is yes, of course we can teach it, but there has to be a hunger for it. And what is hunger? Let me just explain that before we go any further.
mm,
Hunger is pain. It's the
mm,
recognition that I or those that I love or those that I care about will suffer if I don't get this.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? I've been an engineer. I've done a great job of engineering. I've made a good living at engineering. And now the world has changed in the context of the engineering I learned. And my family will suffer if I don't work out how the hell to get outside of this big company and do something
Mhm.
else.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm at least I have enough foresight to recognize that I'm in a stranglehold job that may
Mhm.
be paying me very well, but I'm going to become obsolete very fast.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And if you have enough foresight to see the pain, and this is what we have to do, we have to use consequential thinking to think in advance and go, what is the ongoing consequence of this that allows us to change? Most people are clinging onto something from history while
Mhm.
trying to grasp for the future. Well, you can't do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a point when you let go of that which is in history. And as you let go of that, you feel like you're free falling. It's
Mhm.
terrifying.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's the only way you can get to the other side. So,
Mhm.
yes, we can learn it. However, asterisks, we have to have the hunger. The hunger is the pain, the potential of suffering. Once we let go, we are then forced into looking for the patterns. Because the
Mhm.
problem with the cult of specialization, which is what you're talking about, the problem with the cult of specialization is you're told to think inside the box constantly. And
Mhm.
you go to the job for an interview and they say, can you think outside of the box? And
Mhm.
they've already given you the box to think inside of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
That's
right.
what the
That's right.
job was.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
we
yeah.
need you to have this much, this degree and this
Mhm.
much experience. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the box. And
Yeah,
now you're
yeah.
asking me to think outside the box. You're hiring me because
Mhm.
I fit in the box. That's
Mhm.
ludicrous. So we can learn it, but we won't learn to recognize this piece you asked me about, which is the recognition of where the patterns overlay until we're outside of our own framework. And you
Yeah.
can't be outside of your own framework when you're in it. Put it a
Mhm.
simple way: this: a fish cannot describe water. No one is objective in their subjective reality. You are swimming around in your own shit and you don't recognize it because it's
Mhm.
what you swim around in every day. But if I
Mhm.
take you out of there and put you somewhere else, you are likely to go, oh, this is like that.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
speak English. What else do you speak?
I speak two other languages, Hindi and Punjabi.
You speak Hindi and Punjabi.
Yeah.
And can you find similarities between those languages now?
Absolutely.
Of
Absolutely.
course. But
Yeah.
for the rest of us who don't, we're like, what? Those things are similar?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because if you go to England and you're in somebody's house and they go, would you like a cup of cha?
Yeah,
And you go, do you mean chai? And they
yeah.
go, no, cha. Well, that comes from the British Empire, who went
Yeah.
to India and they learned to have chai, but they changed chai to cha. And you go, oh, that's what it is. You
Yeah,
can see
yeah.
the connection.
Mhm.
It's not until you're outside of your environment and you've got
Mhm.
something else you can start seeing these pattern recognitions. You see the pattern recognition between, you know, for instance, English, which is Germanic and it's romantic. It's got
Mhm.
both inside in there, and those two are very opposite. The
Mhm.
Germanic and the Romantic languages are very different.
Mhm.
English is a crazy language. It's very difficult to learn because it combines those two things.
Yeah, yeah,
And just
yeah.
as a sidebar for those of us who are a bit wonky and love weird things, I don't know if you know this, Manoj, but the heritage language of German. Do you know what it is?
Sanskrit?
Hindi. You're right.
Yeah,
Sanskrit.
yeah, yeah.
No, but like people like German and Sanskrit. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the heritage of that language. Isn't that
Yeah,
like when I found that out about 20 years ago? It was like, wow,
yeah,
that is understanding patterns.
yeah, yeah,
It's looking for things that seem totally, absolutely disconnected that are underneath. If you dig down into the root of them, that's what the emotional source code is about. You
yeah,
discover this underlying pattern. And when you do that, the whole world opens up to you. You see technology differently. You see business differently. You see the way to serve people in a much bigger way.
yeah. Absolutely. That's well said. Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive deeper into this concept of emotional source code. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about that and how does that play a role in everything that you said, particularly in business and in helping us achieve what we are looking to achieve.
So the emotional source code, thank you for asking about it, because it is, I'm the architect of it, as you know. And the truth of it is that we, when I say we, humans, we tend to want to go, oh, I want to change this behavior. Right? There's behaviors, we all recognize we got behaviors that are crappy and we want to change them. And that's great. It's good that you have the impetus to change it, and you may find that you changed it, but it doesn't stick. It's like a New Year's resolution. It changed for 10
Mhm.
minutes, and then somebody passed a donut by you and you went, oh, yeah, I'm off the diet. Right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, because behaviors are the really the flower head, the you cut the flower head off, you've not dealt with anything, right? So, below that, below the behaviors, you have the values and belief systems. So belief systems, um, when they collect together, a certain amount of them, you get a paradigm, and a paradigm forms beliefs, and beliefs
Mhm.
form values.
Mhm,
So the
mhm,
beliefs and values are what drive behavior. So
mhm,
if you want to understand somebody's behavior, you've got to find out, well, what is the beliefs and values they're holding to do this thing.
mhm,
Like, this person's just ran 3 marathons in a row. It seems pretty impossible. What are the beliefs and values that drive that?
mhm,
And now you get to that. So, level 1, behavior. Level 2, beliefs and values. But if you want to really understand what this person's how they actually are able to do it, you've got to look at the identity. Now, people will not do what is not aligned with the identity they hold. Now, they may not know what the identity is they hold, but actually it's still driving everything.
mhm,
So,
mhm.
what, for instance, if you are, so one of my identity before I did a lot of work on myself was that I was tough.
Mhm,
And what
mhm.
that meant was, coming from where I came from, you could knock me down 7 times and I would get up 8.
Mhm, mhm,
Okay. That's a stupid identity.
mhm.
It's a stupid identity. It was mine, but it was stupid because it
Mhm.
means I never learned anything. I get
Mm.
knocked down, I get up again. I'm like a bloody one of those kids things that
Yeah,
parent
yeah,
tells
yeah.
you up. Instead of staying down and going, okay, what happened? Why did I get knocked on my ass? What do I need to learn?
Mm,
So,
mhm.
what's the identity? And if I say to somebody, what's the most important thing in life? Like, if you had to boil it down, and they go, well, my family, no, no, boil it down. Eventually they'll go, I think it must be life itself, like, just to be able to be alive, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I say, well, then how do you explain somebody who will strap a bomb to themselves and blow themselves up?
Mhm, mhm.
And they go, oh, I don't know. Of course, I understand you don't know. Why would you know? And the answer is because the identity of that person is so big, it's bigger than life itself.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I will let my life go because my identity is that I'm a hero. My identity is that I am a martyr. My identity is I care so much for my family that I'm willing to take my own life.
Mhm, mhm.
Identity. So, like, think about that. That's massive. You would
Yes,
give up
yeah.
your life for your identity. People died on the cross for their identity.
Yeah, yeah.
This happened to so many people. People have died in all kinds of ways because of their identity. They were willing to stay on that.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
below identity, how do we get our identity? The answer is meaning, the meaning
Mhm,
you've given life. Now, most people walking around don't know the meaning of that life. It's an unconscious process that's happening, but it's driving their identity. That meaning of your life came out of the emotional source code. The emotional source code is kind of like your emotional DNA.
mhm, mhm.
You were given it by virtue of your birth, being born where you were born, to the family you were born, in the environment you were born, and you formed meaning out of each of those things. That meaning gave you an identity. You worked out what that identity was based on the meaning you decided. That formed your beliefs and your values, and it has your behavior. If you don't know your emotional source code, there's no way to understand the meaning of your life. There's no
Mhm,
way to understand what the identity is you're holding on to. You hold on to beliefs and values that are likely not your own,
mhm,
that
mhm.
you were imposed upon you, or you just marinated in because, I'm a Christian. Why? I ask people this. Why? You go, well, my mom and dad's Christian.
Mhm,
Okay. You fell out of a Christian vagina. You had a Christian sperm donor. Does that make you a Christian? Because
mhm.
if I park my Ford in a Ferrari garage, Does that make it a Ferrari? No. So if
Mm-hmm.
you go to church every Sunday, that doesn't make you a Christian
Yeah,
or a Muslim or a Jew or whatever it might be.
yeah,
So we're holding beliefs that are not ours based on the identity. I'm my mother's son. I'm my father's son. Based on the meaning I've given my life, good people are Christian. Okay, that's not necessarily true, but all right. And that comes out of the fact that I had this emotional source code of I was born in the South in this completely Christian white environment.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when
Yeah.
we understand that, we go back those 5 levels, it's complex, I understand. We now understand what's driving every individual. Now we can look at that, and as you know, Manoush, because we've talked about this, I did that for people like, well, not for, they didn't request it, but I did it on people like Donald Trump. I did it on Vladimir Putin when he invaded the Ukraine. And I put that on my website so people could understand what is driving this human being. But you can also do it for nations. Like as
Mm-hmm.
big as a nation, I can find the emotional source code of the United States. I can find the emotional source code of the United Kingdom or whatever it might be. And we can also do it for organizations
Mm-hmm.
because that emotional source code and its sense of meaning starts with how we bond, how
Mm-hmm.
we bond, because that determines, okay, what's safe. And once we start bonding, that's when we start forming that 5 levels deep. And so when we get a company and I do it, it's like, oh my God, we've been sending absolutely the wrong message.
Mm-hmm.
And now we got to change the message, and boom, everything transforms, including all the people involved, because now they're bonded to this purpose, which is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
a Simon Sinek purpose. It's a deeply emotional purpose that everybody wants to be part of.
yeah, yeah. That's great. That's awesome. That's very deep. I hope people can really relate to that because that was complex. But once you get it, it is very powerful concept. So, how do you like? If you can describe in sort of short detail, like how do you figure that out? Like, do you go through like an algorithm? Do you have your own survey? Like, what do you do to find that source code?
Well, we don't have any technology for it right now, apart from inside of me.
Mm.
We are developing that software right now. That's in research. I'd like to do more on it, and there's a couple of people who've been helping me that to be honest with you, I'm not entirely happy with
Mm.
yet. Maybe that's where you and I will do some things together.
Yeah.
Um, but it's working out all that is so incredibly valuable. And by the way, if you found what I said complex, please go back and listen to it again. Because
Mm.
here's what I know about the brain. It doesn't take things in the first time.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
need to take it in, listen to it, go, oh, okay, go back, listen again, take some notes, go back and listen again, and listen for what your brain deleted, because
yeah.
that's what the
Mm.
brain does. It deletes what it doesn't understand because nobody likes to feel stupid. And
Yeah.
I have zero intention of making you feel stupid. I actually want you to feel smart by understanding this. So go back and listen to it a couple of times and it will really awaken things in you. So
Mm.
the way, like I said, the algorithm, if you will, is in within me, but and that's why the people bring me into politically or to corporations. But the way to understand it in yourself is to walk back through those 5 traps using one instant. So I have
Mm.
this behavior. What might be the belief that supports this behavior? What might be the
Got it.
series of beliefs or the value? What might be the strongest identity? It doesn't matter if you get it right. It's going to teach you how to get there. What might be the strongest identity I need in order to fulfill that? What
Mm.
meaning would I have to have in life in order to have that?
Mm-hmm.
Once you start doing that, you're like, oh Jesus, now it makes sense. Because the number one response from my work is, of course. In
Mm-hmm.
sales, I used to teach people in sales that you want to build the yes ladder. You want to get people to yes. So they're, oh yes, 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 yes. And then you say, would you like to sign the paper? And they go, yes. That's a yes
Mm-hmm.
ladder.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in the yes ladder anymore. It's an of course ladder. But
Mm-hmm.
people are just going, of course, of course, of course.
Yeah.
What? Because once it makes sense to you, there's nowhere else to go. It's like,
Yeah.
I can't deny it.
Yeah, that's great. So now let's throw like a curveball at you, and I think you're gonna handle it nicely. Uh, there's a lot, I'm an expert in AI, and there's a lot of talk about AI. One of the fears that people have is that AI is going to take over humanity and kill humanity one day. And I want to get your take on this thing because it's a very interesting concept when you think about the emotional source code of an entity like artificial intelligence and
Yeah.
how it may behave in the world. So,
Mhm.
what are your views around that?
It's really interesting. Nobody's asked me about the emotional source code of artificial intelligence, and that's a great question. And I'm actually gonna go away and think about that
Mhm,
off this show. So thank you for giving me that provocative question.
mhm,
However, in the context of looking at it and being afraid of it, and is it going to take over the world? I When you think about what artificial intelligence is at the basic level, artificial intelligence relies on us. We're the ones feeding it the information. And so, if we're fearful of artificial intelligence having no moral compass, and we are the ones programming it, and when I say programming it, meaning through all of its massive spider web connection to all the information on the out on the internet, we need to understand if we're lacking moral compass, why the hell wouldn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Like if you're looking at your kid and you're going, my kid is a spoiled, entitled little shit,
yeah,
I'm going to look at you and go, well, I wonder where they learned it, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
if AI becomes a spoiled, entitled little shit that wants to kill you,
Yeah,
you got to look in the mirror. And so I think in many ways, artificial intelligence, I understand the nervousness about it and understand the wanting to build those parameters for it and hold it a bit. I
mhm,
think we're a bit late for that personally already.
mhm,
But I think that it's this great reminder that we've got to return to our humanity.
mhm,
We've got to come away from being so polarized. We've got to come back to saying, who are we as humans and how can we find the compassion and the love and the empathy for each other? Because this is just my belief, it's not the truth. My belief is everyone I meet is a reflection of me.
yeah,
And I don't mean that in a egoic way. I mean that in a deeply empathetic and compassionate way.
yeah, yeah,
If you're a shit, where's that shit in me?
mhm,
If
mhm,
you're magnificent, where's that magnificence in me?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so, in that context, AI is a reflection of ours. And if
Absolutely
we're
right.
not liking that it's operating in a biased way, we need to understand that it's getting those biases from us.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
for me, that's the greatest strategy we can use. If you can't put the bird back in the cage, it's too late.
Yeah, yeah,
But you can say, okay, now if it's feeding on our thoughts, is it feeding on our information that we're putting out there, then we need to be a hell of a lot more intentional about putting out some love and compassion and caring and understanding and less polarization and less vitriol and hyperbolic language and look at how we can be more compassionate and more loving and more caring to each other.
yeah. That's a great point. By the way, I completely agree with you. One of the things that people are also afraid of is, what if AI becomes self-aware? And to that, I say, less than 1% of the humanity is self-aware. So let's work on becoming self-aware ourselves first, and then worry about AI becoming self-aware.
And again, I've had that discussion too, because for me, the question becomes, well, how do you define self aware?
Hmm, hmm,
Because I can tell you, there's been many occasions where I've sat down with people who, you and I talked about this when we were having lunch together, sat down with many people who uh, have taken all the courses. They went to Tony Robbins and they did Harvecker's program and they even went to therapy for a while and they have a coach and they're about as self aware as a wet sock.
hmm, hmm.
They've got information, but information is not transformation.
Yeah,
Information is worth the hole in the donut without the integration that creates the transformation. If you don't take it in, you don't transform. And if you're only at this surface level of approaching everything with all your knowledge, then yeah, you're replaceable now
Yeah, yeah,
with
exactly.
AI.
Yeah, yeah.
But self knowledge is the ability to have compassion and to have empathy and to see the other in me with kindness and understanding
Yeah.
and to say, okay, and I challenge people on this all the time. I want you to think about the person you hate the most. That could be Donald Trump. That could be uh, Barack Obama. It could be Adolf Hitler. You pick the person. Might be your Aunt Sally, whoever it is, right? Might be your
Hmm.
dad who abused you, right? And then I just want you to just stop. And I'm going to ask you to do something extremely painful and say, where do I see myself in this?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
What reflection of me? This is back to Vedanta. This is back to Buddhism. It's back to the Tao, back to Kabbalah, right? Where is that reflection of me? In when we start doing that, we start to go, okay, I'm looking at judging and projecting on you, but the work is always in the mirror.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And so if you're going to solve the problem, so let's just flip this back to business. You're an entrepreneur. You're a successful entrepreneur. You've done amazing things and you've hit this plateau and you don't know why. Because you've stopped looking at the problem from their point of view.
Hmm. Hmm.
You've moved into the solution thinking, understandably, and you're offering solutions, but you're not in their shoes. And if you're not in their shoes, what your solution seems obvious, but it's not to them. The
Hmm. Hmm.
emotional source code seems incredibly obvious to me. I know it's not obvious to 99.9% of people. I know
Hmm.
that. So I've got to find a way to make it obvious to them. And the only way to do that is to move into their space.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you move yourself into the space of the other? You want to be better at business. You want to be a better entrepreneur. You want to serve at a higher level. You have got to be able to eat, sleep, think, breathe, be in the skin of the other person. And
Hmm.
that takes a lot of humility. That means get off your ego horse, step down, and be in the dirt with everybody else and go, okay, like, what does this really take?
Yeah,
Once you do that, it transforms you, but it also transforms the way that you can serve because you're now looking at customers and even potential customers from a whole different level.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Very well said. So, you already are such like a gifted learner. You have so much knowledge. You are mentoring like other leaders. But what kind of mentors did you have? What kind of, um, you know, who who was most impactful in your life?
That's a great question. So I believe that we all have mentors, whether we choose them or not.
Hmm.
And the problem with not choosing them is often we're following in the path of people who are doing stupid shit,
Hmm.
right? And I'm not saying I wasn't there. I've been there too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so the way to think about this is think about your mentors in or in three frameworks. Mentors you had who were positive, mentors you had who were negative,
Hmm. Hmm.
and mentors you had that you didn't know that were mentoring you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Exactly.
for instance, one of my greatest mentors was Khalil Gibran.
Mm.
I never met Khalil Gibran. He was dead long before I was alive. He wrote a book that I carry around as my Bible, and that is called The Prophet.
Hmm.
It is one of the most beautiful books ever written, and it's deeply insightful and it's beautiful. I
Hmm.
never met Khalil Gibran, but that
Hmm.
book is worth reading, and I read it at least 3 times a year.
Okay.
Right? If I go on holiday, I take it with me. It's the book I want to read on the beach, and I know
Hmm.
every word, but it's
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the unconscious, unknown mentor. For instance, a mentor of yours might be somebody who is living but you never met, which might be
Yeah.
make an example like Oprah, right?
Mhm, mhm,
Or maybe it's Elon Musk or whoever it is,
mhm.
right? So you're learning from them by virtue of their example.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Then you have the chosen living positive mentor. So you go, oh, I've learned so much from Manoj. I'm going to follow him. I'm going to listen to everything he speaks about. I'm watching. I'm listening to his podcast every opportunity. I replay it. I take notes. He writes great articles, and I listen to him. He's very insightful, and I really get that he gets me, and I get him. So I'm choosing that person, and now I'd like to hire him to mentor me, and because I want more specific mentoring to me. Very important, by the way. I think everybody should do that. If you don't spend the money investing in somebody who can help you, you're going to be working with generalized knowledge. It's great, it's helpful,
Yeah,
but it's not enough to get to
yeah,
that
yeah.
over that plateau. And then there's a third group, and I think the third group is really important. So I was being interviewed on the CBC in Saskatchewan many years ago when I was on tour, and they were asking me who was my greatest teacher because they'd just been asking me about all these different religious philosophies I'd learned. And I said, oh, that's definitely my father. And they said, oh, was your father a great spiritual man? And I said, no, my father was a narcissistic sociopath.
Mm,
And they're like,
mm.
huh? And I said, my father taught me everything not to do
Yeah, yeah,
by his
yeah.
example. He was a misogynist. He was treated people very poorly. He was good looking and had a ton of charisma. I said, and as a result, for the first 26 years of my life, I walked around believing I was ugly
Mm,
because I didn't want to be like him, right?
mm.
Because I saw good looks as being a detriment.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, and he became a very powerful mentor to me in always being these bumper on the side of like, oh, you're getting a bit cocky here, mate. Are
Mm,
you going down that road? And it didn't mean I was going down the road, but it would sit there as like a warning system, like those cars you have that tell you when you're leaving the lines,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was a warning system, like beep, oh, you're getting a little too far over here. My father had no spiritual connection whatsoever. So immediately I start thinking that, well, I'm all that in a bag of chips. Those beepers
Mm,
go off and like, that's on my father's path. That's not my path. So I think we have
mm.
negative mentors as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I would challenge everybody to write down who are your mentors in those three categories and look at what you've learned instead of just going, oh, my dad was shit or my mom was shitty. Like, okay, that's fine. This teacher was horrible. What did you get that's actually giving you some fuel to say, I'm not
Yeah,
going down that road?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that
yeah.
becomes a really great system for you staying connected to your own purpose.
Yeah, that's very well explained. I mean, I asked that question to almost everyone, but I think you really distilled it down because I can clearly see those distinctions between different types of mentors, and I have learned a lot from my mentors, and also, as you said, what not to do as well from many mentors. So thank you for
Exactly.
yeah,
And if
yeah.
I tell you don't do this,
Mhm.
that's fine. You might not do it, but there's a pretty good chance you're still going to do it. Everybody,
Yeah,
how many of us were told don't smoke and then went out and bought a packet of cigarettes when we were a kid?
yeah,
Or how
yeah,
many of us were told don't drink and then we're stealing booze when dad was out and
yeah,
topping it up
yeah,
with water, right? We've all been
yeah,
down that road.
yeah, yeah.
But it's different when you are living with an example and you see the consequences of that behavior. Like everybody in my family except me has been a chain smoker.
Mm,
Everybody in my family except me. And all the people older than me have died with cancer.
wow.
Every one of them. And I have
Yeah,
siblings who have constant problems with breathing and all these things. I can see the results,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
that was always there. And so this is where we're terrible at being mentors ourselves, because we say, don't do this, but we don't demonstrate the behavior.
yeah,
My
exactly.
stepfather had three of us lined up, the three eldest kids lined up, and he's standing there with his cigarette in his mouth like this, and he's
Mhm,
squinching as the smoke is going in his eye and
mhm,
saying, don't smoke, it's bad for you.
mhm.
Well, my two siblings I was standing with, both became chain smokers. I
Mm,
don't know why. Maybe it was a
mm.
good example,
Yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for such an insightful and interesting conversation. I expected that much, but it has been really, really good. Thank you. And now, before I let you go, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
There's all kinds of ways, but the easiest way you can email me. Yes, I'm insane. I give my email address. My email is dov@dovbaron.com, DOV at DOVBARON.com. And if you're thinking, oh, well, you probably want to talk to me, that's your ego. Stop it. Reach out. It's
Mm,
okay. Right.
yeah,
I talk to people. I talk to Manoush. If I talk to him, I talk to everybody.
yeah,
Right, so reach out to me if you want to. If you want to, if I can be of service to you, you can find. Of course, my website is dovbaron.com, DOVBARON.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter on there. I write every week, every Tuesday. I publish on there. I also write for Medium. I write for Entrepreneur Magazine. I write for many different outlets. I have two podcasts: the Leadership and Loyalty podcast and Curiosity Bites. You can find those in wherever you listen to podcasts. You put my name in and it'll come up. I'm also on a lot of other people's podcasts. And there's a YouTube channel again, Dov Baron Leadership. And again, dovbaron.com. Really, you can find me anywhere. It's an unusual name. There's not many of us. And if I can be of service to you, please let me know. I'm on all the social outlets as well.
yeah. Well, I've had the pleasure of meeting you and feeling the positive energy and all that you said in person. So please do reach out, and we'll put those links in the show notes so that it's easier for them to reach out.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.